In recent years, several companies popped up who offer service to help launching Medspas, companies like Moxie, Portrait, or Aluma. Would you like to share how you started working and what was your experience?
I had no idea they existed. I saw their ads on Instagram. It was a great learning experience that a lot of aesthetic providers don't have when they start, so they tend to lean on these business service companies. They do have access to your patient data. So about a week ago, all of my patients got texts.
What was the core reason you then decided to move on to your own clinic?
I wanted to give my patients my time and attention that they deserve. If you have that growth mindset, I would consider just starting on your own from the beginning.
It's the foundation of your business. It's a killer if you start with 3 clinics in the first year and think you just can hire injectors and put them in there. It doesn't work.
You are the product. You are the experience. Don't hire another injector until you are fully maximized. We didn't even realize the potential that our business has, and that's what we're excited for. And I pulled the trigger on just going out on our own, and it was a huge undertaking. I basically had to reset up the entire infrastructure, but it was worth it.
What is aesthetics looking like in 10 or 15 years, whatever you prefer?
I think we're going to see more and more of that, a little bit of regenerative medicine, as well as advances in prevention and aging in a healthy way.
Today on my show, Kelsey Maynard. She's Master of Science and Physician Assistant from the Boston University School of Medicine. She opened her boutique Medspa in March 2023 in Santa Rosa, California, and gained 1.2 million in revenue in her very first year. She started in a very smart way, in my opinion, by keeping her infrastructure costs low with only 1 treatment room. But let's listen to Kelsey and her journey and the top 5 things you should know before opening your own med spa with a service provider. Welcome, Kelsey Maynard, to my podcast, Aesthetics and Biz. Hi, Kelsey. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. It's my very first podcast recording this year, so I'm very sorry for the initial technical issues, but I'm highly thrilled and motivated.
Awesome.
Good. Kelsey, let's start with an important topic. Business service providers or companies who support med spas in their launch phase and maybe further on. In recent years, several companies popped up who offer service to help launching med spas, companies like Moxie, Portrait, or Aluma. Do I spell them right? And you started with Portrait and then considered later to move on to Moxie before you decided to do it on your own. Would you like to share how you started working with Portrait and what was your experience?
Yeah. So Portrait and Moxie are the 2 big med spa business launch companies here in the U.S. I had no idea they existed. I saw their ads on Instagram, and then one of their representatives sent me a message, and I was like, this sounds too good to be true. I owned fitness studios before I owned my med spa, so I knew eventually I wanted to leave the big practice I was at to open a boutique that was more patient-centered and aligned with my goals and ethos. So when Portrait approached me, I took some meetings with their staff and decided to move forward and launch my med spa with them.
Good. Could we jump in quickly into your previous experience? You were running some fitness companies or had your own fitness gym?
Yeah.
What did you experience?
So I always joke and say teaching spin class was the career that chose me. Like, I never went to college thinking, oh, I want to be a spin instructor or I want to open cycling studios. But it was just something that I did all through my training and then into my adult life. I taught like cycling classes at high-end boutiques. The big one you would recognize is Soul Cycle. I never worked for them, but similar idea, very like high-end, expensive boutique class. and I consulted for about 12 cycling studios, both nationally and internationally. I trained over 100 cycling instructors, and then finally opened my own chain of cycling studios here in California, that I eventually sold because I was too busy at my med spa. But it was a great learning experience that a lot of aesthetic providers don't have when they start, so they tend to lean on these business service companies.
How many cycling studios did you own in your peak?
In my peak, I owned like two and a half. I had two of my own and co-owned one. Yeah.
I'm in one myself, and I love it. It's this kind of club atmosphere, and you is that what you did? So it's
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's like a disco or dancing club, and you do cycling
Yep.
and power yourself out. Is that what it's? Yeah,
Yeah. That's
love it.
exactly what it's
We
like.
do it
It's
here
the
in
best.
Switzerland.
I was going to say we'll have to go in
Cool.
Switzerland at Inner
So
Circle.
yes, cool, great. Kelsey, I would like to quickly discuss your previous employer. You worked in a med spa, and this med spa was bought by private equity. To quickly describe the difference between private equity and what we initially discussed and will further discuss, the service companies. So private equity are investment companies buying med spas, clinics, practices, mostly the majority, keeps the key people in, tries to optimize these companies. Buy and build means selling more and more clinics and med spas to then sell it to another company for a better price. And the leverage they have is mostly on multiples on the profit or other financial engineering stuff they can optimize. So that's how it works. And it's quite common in our industry that private equity companies are taking over clinics, med spas, practices. It's the same in the healthcare system, not only aesthetics. And it's a little bit of an issue sometimes because the ethos we doctors and medical providers have, and luckily in the aesthetic field, we all coming from the healthcare industry, is not always a fit to maximizing profitability. And so we have the same issue here. While Moxie, Portrait, or Oluma are companies who offer some kind of franchise system, I would name it that way. They offer services, help, stuff like this. So that's the difference we're talking. But your previous company of previous med spa was then bought by a private equity company. What was your experience here? What was the core reason you then decided to move on to your own clinic?
Yeah, I had a lot of experience building brands when building my fitness brand and building an experience for the fitness customer. So personally, I couldn't stop thinking about how I wanted my patient's experience to be. When experiencing a treatment with me, I want them to experience a brand. And even before private equity came in, I was working at a really big med spa, like 3 surgeons, 4 providers, 2 estheticians, very short appointment times, sometimes double and triple booked. I was seeing up to 25 patients in a 10-hour day. And I just think patients deserve our time. They're spending their hard-earned money. I wanted to give my patients my time and attention that they deserved. So I always wanted to go out on my own. And when private equity moved in, I didn't stay very long. I actually left before the transition fully happened because, I just knew that, the experience I was already having about this high volume situation probably wasn't going to get better with private equity because they have to maximize profits and pay their shareholders. So it kind of takes that patient-centered focus away. And I can't say that's exactly what's happening. I don't want to, speak ill of somewhere I used to work at. But when you're going for high volume and profit margin, is the patient still at the center? Are they still the focus? And that's something I didn't want to lose. So it launched me into creating my own boutique faster than I think I would have.
Great. I think both is possible. You can be highly profitable and doing very well financially and at the same time deliver an exceptional service and best quality, but you know how to do it. And it's not by just squeezing out the providers and minimizing the time and maximizing the money. But that's maybe a topic for another podcast. So let's move on to the service providers you garnered experience with. Why did you choose? So you had previous experience from your cycling studios, and we'll come back to that later. But what was your core motivation to start working with Portrait?
So Portrait's model at the time I joined with them was a full financial model, meaning they covered all of the startup costs. And all I had to do was, help create the brand, show up and start treating my patients. And then we did a revenue share that I actually can't share the details of, but I think they still offer this model. So any listeners can reach out to them directly. And that profit share would still make me more money than working at my last job, but I didn't actually have to make any large lump sum investment to open my own boutique.
Which is an advantage, especially if you start off. You might not have the funds to go on your own. So is that what they generally offer, or what is the range they usually offer? Can you pick what you want? Do you have to take the full package? Do they have various models? What is the service they provide?
Yeah, so now Portrait has evolved to have 3 different models. One is that full financial service. It looks like one is a very minimal model, and there's an option in the middle that I think is similar to what their competitor Moxie offers. Um, Moxie does it a little different where you still use your own money to start your med spa. You pay them a startup fee, and then they take a smaller percentage of your gross revenue. And a big appeal with these companies is they have national buying power with the injectable pharmaceutical companies. So they offer their clients a heavily discounted price on, Botox, neuromodulators, fillers that you couldn't get as a small practice. But for me personally, I ended up running the numbers on that and could save more money just being on my own than having that discount. But I also make very large purchase orders that not every provider can make. So that's another advantage that I think these companies offer, and that's why I have a lot of friends, still working with these companies.
Can we share some numbers in regards what is the percentage you save on, let's say, fillers or Botox in average when you work with these kind of companies? Is it like 10%? Is it 20? Is it 30% of the normal purchase price?
Yeah, I think it depends on the specific SKU that you're purchasing and the specific company. But you can get like half off on some of them from the worst wholesale price, the smallest order. Yeah, so some of them's pretty significant, some not as much. Like my favorite products wouldn't be discounted very much. I think only 15%. So for me, it didn't make sense. But for people who use certain products that they get these big, almost 50% off discounts, it can be really lucrative.
Which is massive, right? 50% off is quite impressive, especially in the United States where the filler costs are quite. I can be open. We pay between 50 and 150 Swiss francs per syringe, which is roughly the same in dollars. Let's make it easy. But you are paying 3 or 4 times as much. So if we consider you get 50% discount on this, that's quite a good amount, in my
Yeah, and that's
opinion.
not all of them. That's just the best offering they have.
Okay.
We, for our syringes here, pay 190 to almost 500 depending on which syringe. And these companies can usually get the syringes, around 200, 300 something. But a few they can get really heavily discounted.
Are we allowed to share some other numbers? Are we allowed to share the split you have to, or the fee you have to pay from your gross revenue So gross revenue is the total amount of income, to be precise. I'm not sure how familiar our listeners are with these kind of special terms from financial industry. So the entire money which comes in is the gross revenue, to make it easy, and they take a share of it. Are we allowed to give an indication how much it is?
So I can't share the specifics from Portrait, but it is, they take the majority because in the model I was in, they were paying all the bills. With Moxie, with Moxie, they take 9% of your gross and then charge you a launch fee of close to $4,000. And this is, what I've heard from friends using them. I haven't heard this directly from the company. So I always advise, if you're interested, please reach out to these companies directly. But what I've heard from friends is that they take 9% of your gross revenue. And they do offer more services than just the discounts, which I'm happy to get into as well.
That's what I heard, and that's what classical franchise models do. They're between 9 and 11%. I mean, McDonald's or Kentucky Fried Chicken are franchise models, and I think they operate with similar numbers. So that's fair, in my opinion, depending on what they offer and help with. What are you getting for the 3,000 or 4,000 initial investment? I mean, it's not too much money. What do you get in exchange for that? Is it the full setup, a marketing plan, location, medical director, or is it only very initial package?
The initial fee is usually for the initial startup package, which usually includes some sort of checklist of here's all the things you need to do. But then you also are still paying an attorney to actually, file your corporation paperwork. You are still paying your medical director separately. You have the option to pay separately for a phone answering service. So all of your expenses when you use Moxie or Portrait's similar model are your expenses. And then on top of that, you're paying for what I consider more of a consulting type advice. Both companies also allow you to use their electronic medical record, which some people like and some people don't. I think there's no perfect EMR out there, but that initial investment and your 9% does come with their proprietary electronic medical record as well.
Here I have a question, Kelsey. What is about your patient data? So, I mean, that sounds promising. It's great, and these systems are very, I think they're key for any success story. The IT and the foundation is a key element. But in Europe, we're very, very clear on data protection. So even if we would take a foreign software or application, they wouldn't have access to the patient data. Is this the case in your country as well, or is there any risk that they take advantage of your patient data?
Yeah, so I recently had some experience with this. While it does say that the patient data and charting belongs to the practice, so let me back up a little. When you launch your business with or without one of these services, you have to have your own medical corporation. In California, that has to be owned 51% by a doctor. So Dr. Maynard, my husband and medical director, owns 51% of our practice. I own the other 49%, and we don't have to do any further paperwork. For someone who's not married to their medical director, you have to set up a management organization company with an attorney. So your Medspa is completely yours. At the end of the day, if you do something wrong or that violates HIPAA, our privacy protections here, it's on you. It's not on the business services company, but they do have access to your patient data. So I stopped working with Portrait in July, and about a week ago, all of my patients got texts to go to another provider and get $9 per unit Botox and buy 2 syringes, get 1 free filler, because Portrait launched another nurse 5 minutes away from me. And so one of my friends texted back and said, "How did you get this number?" And they said, "Oh, you were in the Portrait Santa Rosa database." So that's a risk I think providers don't know when they're working with these companies, is they do have all your patient data. And I don't
How
know
can you
the
avoid this? Can you do that by contract? Can you do that by yeah, some kind of clear contract? Because I think that's really a risk. Your patient data is not only something which should be secured, also it's the foundation of your business. Although I think if you're a great provider, you don't have to fear that. And I think in your case it was the same. They all turned back, but it's not a very amusing thing getting aware of things like that. So is there any option to avoid it?
Yeah, I think that was a lesson I learned, not really learned the hard way, but hindsight being 2020, is I wish I had my attorney go through with a fine-tooth comb and put some more protections in place. But these companies come across as like, this is the contract, you kind of sign it and we get started. And I even had friends who didn't want to spend the money on their own attorney. And I think that's vital, because at the end of the day, like, these companies have their legal counsel that say, "Oh, I can read your contract from your old Medspa. We can make sure you're like moving forward appropriately." But no one advises providers to get your own attorney, read the contract with the business service provider, because I did negotiate some specific things, and I think that's always smart to negotiate, a contract tailored to you, and just don't sign something cookie cutter. But I clearly didn't go deep enough on the ramifications of working with these companies and then leaving.
Kelsey, what would you recommend for nurses who want to start off with their own business? Who should consider working with a company like Moxie or Portrait, and whom you would recommend to start off on their own? Or would you be clear and say everyone should start on their own right away, even if they don't have funds and experience in business? What is your opinion?
Globally, my opinion is against the corporatization of aesthetic medicine. I think when the providers are the shareholders, the care for the patient is going to be optimal. So, just from a pure standpoint of that, I think nurses and mid-level providers should try to open their own practice without these companies, because I think at the end of the day, these companies have their own shareholders and they exist to make themselves money. But there is a specific provider that I think would work well in these models. So if you truly cannot get your own financing together, which is a challenge, you said it yourself, a lot of people DM you on how to get financing, then using Portrait's full service model makes sense, because you can start, and there's going to be specifics in the contract of how you can leave, but you can use it to get started and eventually leave if you outgrow them or pivot to their other model. I also think if you're a provider who just wants to be a solo practitioner, you can go about it either way. Like, I think if you just want to, you in your salon suite, seeing your own patients, not really growing or scaling your med spa, but just working independently, that person could go either way. You could do it on your own, or you could use one of these companies. What I've noticed with myself and other providers is these companies are relatively new. So while they're willing to work with you on scaling, it's just a much slower, kind of more clunky process, because they're not set up for one med spa scaling to multiple providers. So that was a big reason I just chose to leave, not use Portrait, not use Moxie, and be independent, is I can just scale more quickly and easily. So if you have that growth mindset, I would consider just starting on your own from the beginning.
Yeah. So let's assume. What I have to say honestly, if you take the full service of a company and they pay for everything, I totally understand that they have to get their money back or have some kind of advantage from this. So, to be fair on that. But what other terms, if you would like, if you do that and take the full service option and then want to step out of this because you are doing so incredibly well, like you do, and we come back to that later. How can you get out of this? How can you get out of these contracts? Do you have to pay them fully back? Is there any additional fees or interest rates you have to add on? How does it work?
I think the contracts have evolved since I, joined and exited. So I'd have to defer to those specific companies. But usually there's like a exit window. Like you have to give them 90 days notice. So then they still get their like big cut of your next 90 days of production or something similar to that. I had a really specific location in mind and a specific build out. So I, did pay for the construction on my specific location, and everything on my exit I thought was pretty fair. They did invest a lot in, so I wanted to make sure I paid that back to them. But that's, I think, a huge part of whatever contract you sign with whatever company. If you do decide to use one, make sure the exit strategy is something that you can live with.
What was the reason you decided to step out and go on your own journey? Was it your success story? You realized I can do it on my own. It's doing very well. You get new patients and returning patients, and the numbers are great. Was that the reason you decided I'm doing it on my own?
Yeah, it was a little bit multifactorial. I think the reason, even though my husband was still a doctor when I started, I used a different physician through Portrait, was we didn't have the confidence to just put our own savings in and do it on our own. It's almost like we wanted to see how I was going to do. And when we saw that it was very successful and the success was largely, on my end, things I specifically did, not given to me by any company, that was a big step for us. And then a big step for me personally was Nicola Lowry, an amazing physician assistant in Southern California. I had a 25-minute call with her. 10 minutes were about the SoftWave device and how much she loves it, and I was considering buying one. And then the last 15 minutes, she was like, why are you with one of these companies? Your husband's a doctor. I've met you. I know you can do this. And that 15 minutes of someone doing something that I wanted to do. She had already achieved what I wanted to achieve. Her seeing that in me was so incredibly powerful. And that's what I like to coach my mentees about, is sometimes just having someone do it and know you can do it is huge. So confidence was a big thing, one. And then second, financial reasons. If someone else is paying all the bills, you have nothing to write off on your taxes, which in California is very important. And I wanted to buy my own device, and no one had really done that in that model with Portrait. So we were having to negotiate on that. And I was like, you know what? I think I can do this. Other people think I can do this. Financially, it makes more sense. And I pulled the trigger on just going out on our own, and it was a huge undertaking. I basically had to reset up the entire infrastructure, but it was worth it.
Yeah. It's so interesting feeling the permission and the confidence going to embark on your own journey is such a key factor. And that's why we initiated the Inner Circle. And the Inner Circle really is meant to be that you can feel the permission and confidence to go on this journey. I mean, I'm the best example. I was a classical doctor and I started on my own. I had no clue about business. And, I had a contract or a renting contract for my small facility. I rented 15 years ago for like 25 years because it wasn't on my map to go on this journey. Today, it's 4 clinics, 140 employees. I'm on Shark Tank. I have a restaurant, all this. So now I want to encourage everyone. You can do it. You don't have to, right? There are people out there who don't want. They want their peace, they want their salary, they want to spend time with friends and family, which is totally fine. But the ones who would like to be an entrepreneur or go on a journey or want to be successful, I highly encourage to do it. You can't fail. If you put enough effort into it and you're curious and you look out for people who support you and mentor you, you will succeed. And I'm looking forward to In a Circle. You will see it's this spirit and this magical atmosphere which empowers most of the attendees to dream and think big. Thank you for that. Kelsey, what is your husband doing? You mentioned your husband several times. So he's a doctor and he's working with you, or does he have has his own clinic or practice? What is the connection here?
Yeah, so Dr. Andrew Maynard is my husband, and he is a board certified anesthesiologist. So he has just a solo practice of contracting anesthesia with hospitals. And then he also works in our clinic with me, which I actually think is going even better than I initially thought. But anesthesia is very procedure based, and then doing aesthetics is very procedure based. So we go to all the same trainings. He's coming to the Inner Circle with me, and it's been really good. And it's just so nice because if a patient ever has an issue, they get both of us at the same after hours text message. So the doctor's always on call when you come to our clinic.
Cool. Fantastic. So, Kelsey, let's wrap up a little bit this service provider thing. I have a few questions on your then following journey, but let's summarize the positives and the negatives on service provider companies. So what's the positive part?
I think
Pros
the
and cons.
positives, pros and cons. I think the pros are if you truly need consulting help, they can help you with everything you need to launch. A big thing is providing a medical director. That's a rate limiting step a lot of providers hit. You get the national account buying power with the pharma companies. And if you want to just stay a solo provider, they can make it very easy for a non-entrepreneurial minded provider to have, kind of this small brand, small business without taking on the full responsibility of someone who wants to grow and be more entrepreneurial. The negatives, sorry, were you going to ask a question?
Yes, no, go ahead. That's what I wanted to.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the cons are you don't have, full control of your company. You are always going to use their electronic medical record and have some stipulations from these companies. I think their marketing claims seem to overpromise and underdeliver. When I talk to friends that
Why
use
is
these
that? The marketing part. Let me assume, I would think marketing is something very personal and it has to fit or has to align with your values and needs this authentic part of you, right, in some way. And I think it's a lot of effort they have to put in to really figure that out. So I assume they somehow deliver a marketing package, one fits all, which is not really a fit to everyone. Is that the reason it's not working or under-delivering?
I think it's a mix of that and a mix of expectations. I was coaching a woman in Colorado who had a practice in Canada, moved to Colorado, had her children, wanted to get back into doing aesthetics and launching her own practice there. And she basically said, hey, I'm considering using Portrait, Moxie, or neither, and I don't want to do any marketing. She said, I just want to show up, have patients ready for me, and that's why I want to use one of these services. And I will always be real with people when coaching them that's when it comes to small business, and even very, very small business, what you get out is what you put in. So I think being independent, you have to be ready to put in something. But these companies, while they can give you a plan of, I don't know what their plans look like, but for example, like, create your Instagram, create your Facebook, post twice a week, pay to boost these posts, pay for Google advertisements. You still have to execute that plan on your own. They're not executing the plan for you, even if they are executing the ads. What I've heard is they're very generic ads. And is the return on investment there? I'm not sure. I haven't paid for a single advertisement. I, just now got help with my own Instagram for my Medspa, but I think these providers have the expectation of marketing being full service, and it seems like it's more of just a strategy.
Okay, okay. Okay, carry on. You were still with the negatives or cons.
Yeah, the negatives from my perspective are, marketing and how full service is it truly. I think it can be challenging and expensive when you want to leave and grow on your own. I think the electronic medical records could be better, but honestly, any electronic medical record could be better. So take that with a grain of salt. And then the after effects, like my story with, all my patients getting texted from one of these companies. It didn't, yeah. It didn't impact me. Luckily, my patients are very loyal, but, what happens after you leave is something to consider as well.
Fantastic. So we promised the top 5. So I summarize, it's when you consider to start with the service company, you should first find out what are they offering, what is the service they're offering, and what is the range and the options and models. Write down for yourself maybe the pro and cons, not the general ones, the ones for your own journey and your own business plans. Then consider whether it's the right thing for you or not. And then be aware, and you might add some more tips to it. Be aware of preparing your own legal presentation or have your own legal presentation, work on your own contracts. I think that's key. Protect your patient data would be an advice from my end. And yeah, definitely invest in yourself and optimize yourself first. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because that's one of my big topics, finding your why, or you can call it nature or passion, purpose, whatever. I'm not that keen on wording, but finally, it appeared to me when people ask me what is reason for your success, and in the end, it's self-awareness. I work a lot on myself. I realize how I act and how other people perceive my actions, how I see the world, how they might see the world, how can I improve my communications, how can I be better in public speaking. That's why I did the TED Talk last year, which was quite a nice success. So I'm constantly working on myself, and I think that's so key, especially in a business we are in, because it's a people's business, right? If you're in finances or insurances, or engineering, you might just can train your brain on certain topics, but we are so dependent on other people. And I think your success as a injector or medical provider, whatever you do in this field, is so closely related to your personality, to your interpersonal skills, not only in regards to patients, but also in regards as being a leader and building up teams and scaling. So I think that's the best you can do. And again, that's why we set up the inner circle. I'm not advertising it here; it's sold out. But I think that's really the key to every success story. And I loved you mentioned that. Would you like to add something to that? What are you doing to improve yourself? And you mentioned coaching. Would you quickly give the people some knowledge about that? Where can they find you if they're interested in coaching or getting coached by you?
Yeah, I'm not even doing anything formal yet. I just am truly passionate about paying it forward and helping providers who want to be entrepreneurs and even the ones that don't. I love coaching people on how to get a raise at the practice they're at. It shocks me when providers don't even know their own productivity. Like, how many patients are you seeing or how much revenue you're making? Because that's how you get that raise is you say, hey, boss, I'm making you XYZ. I want this percentage of it to keep me motivated. But I just like paying it forward. I feel as though I've gotten a lot of good advice and learned a lot of lessons in my time as an entrepreneur. So right now I'm just very informally paying it forward. So the best way to contact me would be message me on my Instagram at kelseymaynard.pa. And going through this process and preparing for this interview with you, and then talking to that provider in Colorado, she was like, can you just write a checklist of everything you did? And I was like, you know what? I can. And I've been searching the internet to see if this exists, and it doesn't. So I'm going to produce a checklist for providers who want to open. I'm going to start with the state of California because that's where I am, and I know the specific state regulations. So it will just be a download you can buy off my website, and it will be a checklist of, clinical, legal, marketing, what services you need, and I'm just going to write everyone I use and a few others in those categories, and I'm just going to make the document. So that will be available for purchase hopefully in the next month or so. But that's kind of where I'm at as far as mentoring people and what's next on that front. But when I say my tip for injectors is to optimize yourself first, it's really from an efficiency standpoint, because everything you said is true. It's a people business. It's a relationships business. I care so deeply about my patients. I was messaging them from my vacation last week. I think I need to work on boundaries, but I care very deeply. So when you're starting out, when you're starting as a solo provider with your own business, you are the product. You are the experience. So advice I received from Leslie Fletcher, who's a nurse practitioner in Southern California that I look up to very much, was don't hire another injector until you are fully maximized. She said, yeah, hire the support staff. So the first hire I made here was a medical assistant because she allowed me to see more patients without having to cut their appointment times down and increase our efficiency so that when someone was getting a laser, she can do the photos and the numbing cream while I can be doing someone else's Botox. And I think that's huge.
But I think you have to be careful and do not hire too many people because you have to pay them, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So I did the same like you. I started with one PA, and she'd run the admin and all what you mentioned right now. And then I was fully booked. I was at my limits, and then I took first on another injector, or in my case, it was a doctor.
Oh, I lost you for a second. I can't hear.
I said I agree on everything you said. Hiring first someone who takes off everything of your shoulder in regards of admin and numbing and taking photos and all this. Then get your schedule filled up. But then from my perspective, then I would take on the next doctor or injector. In Europe, we mainly hire doctors. Because if your admin overhead gets too big, you have to pay for all of them, and they don't provide any revenue. So I agree on the first step, having an assistant taking off everything off your shoulders, but then when you think of scaling, maybe take on my opinion, can have different opinion, take on the next injector. At one point, you have a really massive overhead. If you have like 140 people, you have an HR department, marketing department, but I can tell you have to afford it. It's getting quite expensive if you have too many people you have to pay, and you're only a single provider. So I think that would be the right. So would you agree on that?
I agree. I think I got the gist. Sorry for my spotty internet. But yeah, I agree. And I see that more with, so not only do we have private equity and these business service launch companies, we do have true med spa finance or true med spa franchises here that, you know, you have to pay the franchise company like 40,000 plus 7%. Then they want you to have $100,000 in the bank so that they can start you with a full admin team. And I agree with you. I think that's, you know, could be done in a better, leaner way. That I think it's careful to find that balance of the right help to keep you efficient, but then making sure that your staff is all ultimately making you money by not going too big on the admin front. Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Kelsey, I want to wrap up this podcast with the last section, which is about your journey as a solopreneur without any providers, without any private equities, just on your own with your husband. And with impressive numbers, in your very first year, you gained 1.2 million in revenue, which is great. Congratulations, really amazing. And what I liked on your story, you started with a very small infrastructure. That's another mistake many people do. They have a big clinic with like 5 treatment rooms, but you have to fill them up, and you won't in the beginning. So it's much better to start off with a small infrastructure and low costs. Would you share your story with us, and let me also know what you learned from your previous experience as an entrepreneur with your cycling studios, and how you could implement these skills and knowledge into your med spa?
Yeah. I learned with the cycling studios about how to build a business on a shoestring budget. So I never had any investors with the cycling studios. I started those with a small loan, and the goal to be cash flow positive pretty quickly. So just learning kind of those basic principles of keeping expenses low, hoping to get revenue high, learning what matters. And it's typically not the physical space. It's the same, I think, in aesthetics and fitness. It's the people that matter. So prioritizing the people and then being able to pivot. I opened my first cycling studio in California 5 weeks before we had to shut down completely for COVID. So I leased all the bikes, we made online videos, we sold merchandise online, then we did outdoor classes. So just being nimble and being able to pivot even physically. I have 900 square feet with one built-in treatment room that was someone's office before us. But then all my furniture is modular. I didn't jump into doing a build out. I let the space show me what it wanted to be. So we still only have one treatment room, but we now have a numbing lounge in the back, so we can at least have someone numbing while the treatment room is in use. And then we prioritized the, thank you. We now prioritized, our schedule, and we have someone working in our clinic 7 days a week, which I never intended on having someone doing procedures on Sundays. But a nurse approached me and wanted to join our team. And I said, the only day we have is Sundays. And she said, I'll take it, because people want to get into this industry and they want to learn. And we do apprenticeships. I don't believe you can learn aesthetics in a one-day course. While we do offer one-day courses, I encourage people to continue beyond that. So people want to work here. They want to apprentice with us and learn the right way and in depth. So we've, I think, been successful because we're staying small, optimizing what we have before we grow.
Yes. I think that's one of the key messages if you want to scale, and the same from my experience. You have to set the foundation. it's a killer if you start with 3 clinics in the first year and think you just can hire injectors and put them in there. It doesn't work. You need a good foundation. The foundation contains, in my opinion, great leadership structure. It needs some kind of company culture. You need to have a set of KPIs, because once you have several clinics, you have to know what you going for, what are your key metrics and numbers. That's basically breaking down your company's vision into metrics. So I think that's important, because you can't lead by family style, but just having your 5 people around you and having lunch with them, you lead 100 or more people. And another really important thing is a great IT or patient CRM system, whatever you name it. The completer, the better. The more numbers and statistics you can get out of it, the better. So I think that's key. And I only can encourage people to start with a prototype like you doing it. Set up the prototype first, see what works, how it works, what is the secret, and then grow and scale. So well done, Kelsey. You're on a very, very good path, and I can't wait to see you here for Inner Circle and go into much more details and skills and stories and sharing memories. Looking forward to that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we're really excited to come to Inner Circle. I think we didn't even realize the potential that our business has, and that's what we're excited for.
Yeah.
Is, your guidance and your team's guidance to brainstorm, like, what do we really want this to grow into, and then how to execute that plan is something we're really excited about, for sure.
Kelsey, one last question. A tradition of this podcast. What is the future of aesthetics? Assume we can move forward into, like they say, 10 years. What is aesthetics looking like in 10 or 15 years, whatever you prefer?
I think the future of aesthetics is prevention. I think we're already seeing it, where my older patients laid outside with baby oil, my middle-aged patients use tanning beds, and my young patients have been religious about their sunscreen in order to have great skin as they age. I think we're going to see more and more of that, a little bit of regenerative medicine, as well as advances in prevention and aging in a healthy way.
You are so true, in my opinion, and you will luckily meet Nicola Conlon here at Inner Circle, a true gem in longevity and science, and it's so interesting to listen to her. And I think you're absolutely right. Prevention and medicine 3.0, or what's the name? Would you name it that way? 3.0, 3.0 in Germany. You know what? Have you read Peter Attia's book, Outlive?
No, I want to.
So interesting. You should. And it's about, so he said, currently we living still medicine 2.0, which is we cure diseases and we react only when they occur, while the future is medicine 3.0, which means we start at a very, very early age. And I have my personal story on this. I discovered quite a strong atherosclerosis a few years ago. And according to doctors, this started already in my 20s, right? And I could have done so much more, realizing back then that I have these issues by, I don't know, balancing my lipids or blood pressure, whatever it is. So I think that's absolutely the future. Preventive medicine, longevity, whatever you name it. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.